Hi, we're back. It's Janet Oliver and Wendy Nelson, and we are together doing a talk today on body space sense. And we're going to be talking about how body space sense relates to our body and the world, the bigger world outside, which we learn our spatial concepts through our body and then in relation to things. And it really can affect a lot of things in life. I'm with Wendy Nelson. She's from Sense Enabled in Seattle, Washington. And I'm Janet Oliver, and I'm in the Minneapolis area. And my place is called Plan for Learning and Living. And we've both been interested in neurodevelopment almost our whole lives. Wendy was a dancer, and I was a marionettist. So what can I say, back in our younger days? So now we are both
It's a long road.
and how our body senses, especially our body senses, interfere with so much of what we're trying to do in everyday life. So let me define body space sense again, just so people understand. When I'm talking about body space sense, I'm really talking about mapping our body and our inner body and our outer environment. That sense of space isn't something absolute. We have to learn it, and we learn it through our body's experiences, okay? Some people call this sense proprioception. I don't use it as much as I used to because proprioception is a very big word, and it's defined slightly different in different disciplines. And it is typically thought of as the information coming into your joints through your proprioceptors, the deep tactile receptors, and therefore you're learning to give your brain a map of your body so that when your eyes are closed, you still know where you are in space, okay? You're not just using your eyes. You can do tasks without seeing them, basically. So that is what is the typical definition. However, there's a lot more going on with it than just that. And I think in our work, we're looking at it as more holistically, from the gross body to the fine motor to the social to the language. All those things are important to what we're trying to say. So Wendy, why don't you start with, we were talking before we got started here on some of the things we see with people who, they might have general body space problems. We talked about that in the earlier video, but when somebody has this problem and then they're trying to deal with their environment, what kind of things might we see?
Oh, you're going to see people who have, they'll have problems with learning a sequence of things. They'll have problems with setting what is a priority.
Oh, yeah.
They'll have problems with math. They'll have problems with space in general. So judging distance between things, judging the force that's needed to do an action will be challenged. You'll see
time too, because time and space are really related, right? I mean,
it's the people who are always running late, myself included, right? Because you think you can do more in a certain amount of time than you can. You misjudge things.
Well, I'm going to say I was a child who had very weak proprioception during a lot of my early life. I had a very traumatic birth, and it affected my proprioception. And the good news is I did everything in my life to try to get that early. I mean, I just worked my body out crazy because I was quite a hyperactive child as well, right? So, my mother wrote a letter to my grandmother, I still have it, where she said, I can't take it 1 minute longer. Jan always moves her arm and she always knocks her milk over every single night. And I was that kid. Because my body to that milk glass, I wasn't seeing it, noticing it, understanding it, being able to maneuver it. And yeah, and so it makes you very clumsy sometimes, or seemingly clumsy.
Right. And it has the behavioral piece of getting too close to people, right? Making people uncomfortable because you have no sense of that body space. Where is your space and where is that personal space? You know, we're all concerned about that. I mean, there are classes taught to kids about personal space, you know? And that comes from that sense of where are you in space.
Can you look at it cognitively? like what their bubble around their body. You know, they do all these things. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but it isn't coming from your body. It's coming from a mental thing of thinking about it, which is extra energy, to be honest. Most of us don't have to think about that bubble. It is just there, right? And so that's just a sign that these kids. Another thing I wanted to say about when I was young, my room, my personal bedroom, was a complete chaotic mess at all times. And my parents hated it. They were always telling me to clean it up. I had two problems. One, if I put something away, I'd forget it even existed. And I think people who have some problems with this body space, with your space, have that problem. So if it wasn't out and I couldn't see it, I didn't remember I had it, or it would I'd forget about it, or I couldn't find it again, that too. So I was one of those people, well, hey, I have my system. You know, I know where everything is, and it's true. I did know where everything is.
Stacks of papers everywhere.
Right? The whole place was a complete chaotic mess. Now, I had to deal with that as I got older, because I had children and stuff, and I had to really mentally overcome that. And I was working on like I said, my proprioception my whole life, so it was something that I did get better with. But that is one of the things we see with this relationship to space. We have trouble with items. Like it is organizational. Like I couldn't think. My first thing was I would disappear. My second thing was I couldn't get a system. I couldn't figure out a sequential system that I could keep going, right, for my things. And I was lucky. I had a stepmom who really took me through and taught me how to do that step by step. Okay.
Well, and it's not just kids. You see this in adults. It's adults as well, you know, that are trying to get through how to study, how to organize their offices, how to, you know, function in a kitchen. I mean, it's not just a child's problem. It is something that we don't outgrow it. Right? I guess is what I'm trying to say. We don't outgrow it.
And I think a lot of this comes out of primitive reflexes too. Because I had that bad birth, almost all my reflexes were not working well. I had startle reflex and a lot of other things, you know, Moro that was really, really high. And therefore I was running really, really high. And my energy level was all the time. And I really do think that affects, if you can't calm down and feel your body,
right,
you don't have this, right? Because you have to be in a calm state of tuning in to really get where your body's coming from. I didn't want to be in my body. I wanted to be out there somewhere doing something, right? And I forget my body needs to come along sometimes with me.
Well, and I think that's the other thing we need to touch on is that disconnect leaves you with a vague sense of unease, right? You don't feel grounded. You may do everything in your power to try and address your anxiety, but if you don't have that solid sense of yourself in yourself, then that's going to be something that's going to help feed your unease. It may be anxiety, it may be a little depression, it may be something that affects your self-confidence.
It's kind of like a mismatch. You know, there's that mismatch, right, between things. And we see that sometimes with the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. When it's persistent on one side, you get this unequal feel. And again, people who have that sometimes try to make their environment help them organize their body. So that's
right.
what I think some kinds of OCD, which are spatial, like these have to be even on both sides. We have to have 3 over here and 3 over here, and everything has to be in an organized order so that I feel organized and I feel symmetrical, because I'm using my eyes to tell my body that I'm symmetrical, even when my body is all asymmetrical. So.
Well, yesterday I did one of our activities. I did face tapping on a client, and we were doing it from a different angle. So they were on the floor and I was doing it from behind instead of in front of.
They couldn't see you.
And they couldn't see me. And eyes were closed. And she got up and said, in my brain, she said, it felt to me like you were doing one half of my face was up here and the other half of my face was down here, even though I knew that you were doing this, but it felt like her face was uneven.
Her body map, because of differences that these developmental things cause, has made a different map on one side than the other. They're not the same. Can you imagine the brain trying to deal with that? That's hard.
Well, it was funny because when she sat up, the first thing she did was went, because she was trying to feel the difference, because she knew in her head, but she could make that, we had made enough progress that she knew that it was even though it felt uneven. I imagine what you feel like when you feel like you can't get that recognition that I know it's symmetrical, when you can't even get to there, right? And there are people that can't. They always feel asymmetrical.
So we usually start in the more gross body, go to the periphery, and then work with that informational piece to the outer world. But I want to talk about another couple areas before we sign off here. One is language, and it's one of my favorite things about it. Our language is extremely spatial. We use all these spatial words, and we don't even know that we do them. Not only do we use them, but we abstract them into other things. So our world's proprioception, so the word under, on, between, beyond, beneath, we use these words, but they're spatial words. So, and almost all of them, you can make them we've used them into a more abstract way. So if I say between you and me, I'm not actually talking about something being between us. I'm talking about something we've said to each other that we don't want to get out into the outer world. But you see how much space there is in that? I mean, there's a lot of space in that. And as somebody who has trouble with this, they don't really get that. They don't understand. Like people with autism, this is a big problem. Their spatial language, they understand it because they cognitively learned it. But that doesn't mean they have it in their body, so they can't play with it like people who have.
Well, I was to say, can you get behind me?
Are you behind me on this?
Can you support me? Yeah. And they're like, why would
it's very literal, right? They'll get concrete. They'll get behind you.
They're trying to move behind you because they think that's what you want, right? They don't see
around. We use it so much. We're not at all aware of how much we use this language. And without it, I did a very interesting experiment, and anybody out there who wants to do this can try it. I took a little fairy tale, little tale, and I took out all the spatial words out of it. Okay, and when you read it, you could understand it. You could understand the story, but when you then took it and read it with all the spatial words in it, it literally deepens it. We use that word deep, right? Deep is a spatial word that we mean. We don't just mean deep in the earth or deep. We mean depth of understanding or depth of meaning. So you see how our mind, our very thinking is really spatial. It's set up in a spatial place. And if you aren't a part of that, if you're not really in on that, you're outside of it. It's very, very hard to understand it.
You just used all of that. You just used the spatial language to.
That's right. You can't not do it.
How do you not use it? Right? I mean, it's all around us.
Yes.
It is our relationship to the environment around us. So if you don't understand that, then you're losing a really essential component to how we relate to each other in the world.
How we understand things. And it's not that you can't, because you can get very intellectual using really, but it's hard to get more playful, more social, more artistic with these things, like poetry.
You don't get the nuances. You can get the logical. You can get the logical if you can boil it down almost like a math equation. Right. But you are not going to get the nuance of the concept, right? You can get that concept, but you don't get the nuance of it.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit last time about some activity, and we did a couple things, but I want to say for this one that I do believe that and a lot of people know this and use it, which is pressure. Like pressure on the body allows people to feel their body in space. And if you know anything about Temple Grandin, she made her own squeeze machine that she would get in and it would squeeze her body. She didn't know anything about body and space sense, but she knew she felt better and safe and was better for longer periods when she used her squeeze box. So we're not asking anyone to develop a squeeze box, but I think that you can do things with cup holds, you know, with
Right.
knowing that you need compression, both in the joints, but also just in the body area, and to help outline. As a matter of fact, a lot of massages, rather than just being all over the place, if they're more organized and more compressive and are in an area, and you're even naming the area when you're doing it, I'm doing your neck, now I'm going into the shoulders, now I'm going down your right arm, now I'm going down, you know, I'm at your elbow. Yeah, it's helping the brain to put in a map.
A map. Yeah. And some people really, I know it sounds kind of odd, but some people really do need to have their bodies mapped. After doing some body mapping work, I've actually had people fall asleep, deeply asleep. People that usually are taking melatonin and all sorts of drugs, right? And they fall asleep on my table.
Their brain for once goes, oh, thank you, I know where you are. Once I know where you are and you're safe, I can relax.
Yeah, I can relax. And it's amazing when you see it happen. It just, and they'll wake up and just, I had one little girl tell me I was magic. You know? Her mother said, what do you say to Miss Wendy? And she said, you're magical. You know? So.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap up this segment. I just want to say that I'm going to give my website and you can give yours. Mine is planforlearning.com, and on YouTube I have a channel, Plan for Living and Learning, and that's what this video will probably be on. And Wendy, what's yours?
My website is senseenabled.com, and I have blogs and articles that are on the website that talk about this topic and others, and that's there for everyone for their information and edification.
All right. Well, we thank you. We're going to be coming back for part 3 of this, which is about the inside of the body, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Wendy.